Hello and welcome back to Writing Radiance, the writing section of my channel. My name is Jubilee Lipsy and I'm the author of biblical fiction novels My Brother the King and Of Sheaves and Stars. And today I wanted to talk about a misconception actually in the writing publishing community that can actually defeat you before you get started if you're not careful to watch for it. And sort of the origin story of this discussion briefly is that I've been in and out of writer communities for several years now on different levels in different contexts. And since starting my self-publishing journey in 2021, I've had a chance to see more of the industry and how it has stacked up against my preconceptions and my hopes and dreams, and how I've grown with that. And I've also gotten to see how other writers react to it. So now that I'm sort of on the other side, it's not a finish line, just in case you were wondering. To have books published is not a finish line. Your work is not done. It's more of a journey. But now that I have published books out there, I'm able to see more clearly how certain misconceptions about publishing were a major disservice to my progress. And I like to help people circumnavigate those issues if they can, because I am seeing this more and more. I'm more aware of it in the writer community. One of the worst misconceptions about writing to publish, at its core, it really has to do with a misunderstanding of God's sovereignty as it pertains to how we steward our gifts in this world. And it ends up sounding something like this. In the world, it might sound like my talent is so obvious and beautiful and it's my destiny and I just know it, and that's all that counts. And so the world will just notice it, define it for me, pull it out of me, and market it without much effort on my part. And that attitude we see everywhere. That comes from, the advent of social media. If we can put it out there, we feel like it's genius. And yet, that sounds pretty naive, right? Because there's so much white noise out there. There's so many people saying the same thing. It's so hard to get attention today because of how much people are saying. So we might immediately write that off as naive, but listen to the Christian version. And I've heard this word for word pretty much from certain people. And I used to think more like this as well. God has given me the talent to write this book the way I have. Therefore, my work is done. He will guide the right publisher to my doorstep, and then they will take my manuscript and just publish it exactly as is because they see the wisdom and the value in it, even if I haven't really thought it through. And that almost sounds like what you would want as a Christian, right? You hear the same thing about other careers and even about things like marriage. Like if it's the right thing, it'll just work out. And if it isn't right, it won't. And to some extent, I used to think that that's how God's sovereignty worked, that he just would make stuff happen and he wouldn't allow stuff that he didn't want and things like that. But when it comes to this specific mindset about writing and publishing, the first problem with it is that it's choosing to be deliberately ignorant about the way the publishing process works. And if you truly believe that this is a calling from God, you shouldn't start off by refusing to learn anything. God doesn't exalt ignorance or lack of planning. His word actually encourages us to, take stock of what we have and figure out where we're headed with it and decide if we have what it takes to get it where it needs to go. I think 1st or 2nd Corinthians says that you're going to be held accountable for what you have, not according to what you don't have. Facing the realities of the world of publishing is really scary, but denying them is not honoring God. It would, I think, honor God more if you were diligent to study your field of interest and then work with him to figure out what path is right for you. The other problem is that this attitude assumes, it's actually very arrogant because it's assuming there's only one way this can work. And you have nothing to learn in the process or nothing to do in the process. Did you even check with God? Did you ask him? And also just one of the biggest parts that I misunderstood going into this is misunderstanding your role as a published author, which is different than being a writer. When you go from being a writer who just writes a blog or writes for yourself or whatever to a published author, there is more responsibility in that. What you want to say and what people hear does not automatically translate. There's a metamorphosis that happens with you and your writing, and it's messy, it's embarrassing, it's frustrating, and it's glorious all at once. And honestly, I would say to people, if you want to know if you're ready to publish, that's what you need. You need to know, am I willing to go the distance with my work? And I'm all in and ready for the growth that needs to happen. If you think the only thing you have to do is just write a book and stop there and everyone else takes it from there, you're mistaken. You don't have to be afraid of marketing as a Christian. Marketing is not a dishonest gimmick when it has to do with you making sure that you're sharing your heart accurately and doing your best unto the Lord and that the right people are going to hear it. There's more of a science to that than you think. Even the Apostle Paul had a strategy of where he preached based on where others had been. He wanted to go places where, people had not been and bring the gospel there. Ultimately, it's a misunderstanding of what faith and sovereignty are and how they work together with strategy. It's assuming that in order to trust God, you need to be arrogant, ignorant, or inactive. But remember, God doesn't just lead, he wants us to follow. He gave Israel the promised land as an inheritance, but they still had to contend for it. They got their marching orders day by day as they sought the Lord, but seeking the Lord was then followed by searching out the land, preparing to fight, and actually fighting. Now, everyone's journey is different. If you have a specific word from God telling you, hold on to the manuscript for 2 years and wait because I'm going to bring you a specific sign or direction, then do it. Each book you write and publish is going to take on a life of its own and take you on different journeys of faith with God, which is amazing. Just stick close to God and you'll understand what he's saying to you. There will be signs everywhere, even outside your writing. This is a ministry more than a business, and we need to be led by the Lord, especially if we're doing it for his honor and glory. But just be careful that you're in the scriptures enough to know what real faith looks like and the action that's involved. Make sure you're not spiritualizing something that is actually disguised as laziness, ignorance, or a fear of stepping out onto the waves. Don't be afraid to ask the Lord, what's really in my heart here? What really is my motive? Have I actually stewarded what is in my hands? Is it actually ready to go the way I think it is? And don't be afraid to find out. He is sovereign, and that means he's sovereign over the journey and not just the one step that you want to be the whole story. You will be happy that that one step is not the whole story. I hope this helps, and I will see you next time.